Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. So tell you what, want to go ahead and switch gears and listen, goes without saying, Sunday, a crazy day in the world of college sports. And what was interesting was how quickly, boom, 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 all these jobs opened, right? Or all these jobs closed, I should say. LSU was open. We know what happened there. Ole Miss didn't wait or do a search. Pete Golding is the next head coach. Arkansas, Auburn, Florida all filled their vacancies. The one spot that is still open, though, is Penn State. And Penn State has been fascinating for a number of different reasons. The most noteworthy, how quiet it is. There really were no leaks. It wasn't public like LSU. It wasn't public like Florida while they were in the Lane Kiffin sweepstakes. But what has become interesting over the last couple of days at Penn State is the fact that there seems to be this innuendo that there is a mystery candidate that Penn State is pursuing. And so, you kind of, in my job, you snoop around, you ask people, you ask questions, and you hear all sorts of names, right? I think early it was, is Lincoln Riley, is he really happy at USC? Could you get him out of that contract? 9-3 season. Josh Heupel, what a weird situation going on over there at Tennessee. But on Sunday, a very interesting name emerged that I just, transparently, not only did I not see coming, I think most people didn't. Kalani Sitake, the BYU head coach, is now being linked to the Penn State coaching job. Listen, to whoever broke the story or whoever reported it first, I apologize. I can't find the original sourcing, but it seems to be something that Penn State people believe is at least a possibility. BYU people seem to believe that is at least a possibility. By the way, right before we got on air, I texted somebody I know at Penn State who said, yeah, no, this is a thing. Not a thing that he's taking the job, but that he's at least in the mix, at least being discussed internally. And so I want to go ahead and discuss the positives and negatives of Kalani Sitake. Would he actually take the Penn State head coaching job? By the way, I should mention, if you're a BYU fan, the time is now to follow our Torres on BYU account, Torres on BYU, for all of your late-breaking BYU news, because there is going to be a lot over the coming days. By the way, you're preparing for one of the biggest games in recent program history. Make sure you're following Torres on BYU. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive in. Let me start by saying this. Kalani Sitake is not only a really good coach, I think he's the most underrated coach in college football. And I say that because I have said for a couple years now, at least probably the last 18 months, I actually think that BYU is maybe the most underrated program in all of college football, right? And Sitake is, not only a big part of it, he is maybe the biggest part of it. This was a guy, he took over kind of during that weird in-between period when BYU was an independent. As a UConn alum, I promise you, the independent life is not for the faint of heart, okay? It is a tough gig. It is tough going. It's tough whatever. And, he did as well as you could possibly do in that situation. In his, let's do the quick math here, 3, 6, 7 years as an independent, he had, let's see here, 6 winning seasons, 3 9-win seasons, an 11-win season when Zach Wilson was his quarterback, and an additional 10-win season. So you knew he was good. They transitioned to the Big 12, and in the last 2 years, it's just been gangbusters for BYU. I said it last year. I thought of every team that got left out. This was a year ago now. I said, look, everyone's focused on Bama and Ole Miss at the time. I said, BYU, I think, matches up better with everybody in the playoff of the teams that were excluded. They go to the bowl game. They destroy Colorado. Give them credit, whatever. What might be even more impressive than last year, though, is what he is doing this year. Obviously, we know what's at stake this weekend, 11-1 overall. A situation where you win that game, you're going to the college football playoff. You lose. Listen, I'm not ready to make any declarative statements. I think the path is tough, whether I agree or disagree. I'm just telling you the way things are set up, I think it's going to be tough. But you're one game away from the college football playoff. And so I just bring it up because he's done an incredible job. And I think this year, he's done an even better job than a year ago, because this year, his starting quarterback is a true freshman who literally was not on campus until May. Like, do you like let's put aside Penn State, BYU. You know how hard it is to do that? You know how hard it is to bring in a quarterback that went through spring ball with somebody else. Forget a true freshman who went through spring ball with somebody else, and get that guy playing at a high level. And so what he is doing is absolutely incredible. And I think the other thing too that I really respect about Sitake, kind of a very identifiable brand, right? We know his background. He was a fullback at BYU. And I only bring it up because tough physical football, really good along both really good in both trenches, I should say, really good along the line of scrimmage. And he runs a physical, tough team with a top 25 run offense as well. I obviously think part of that is the Kyle Whittingham impact, right? So I bring it up. He's a really good coach. I bring it up because I do think, listen, let's call a spade as we're talking this through. Penn State's a really good job. And I can be critical of certain things and how they've handled whatever, and they didn't beat this team on this day. Penn State, in my opinion, is a top 10 job in America, okay? Huge stadium. The resources, to the credit of the new AD, Pat Kraft, like I think he's really modernized that operation. I think James Franklin justifiably was not happy with some of the things that went on in that program behind the scenes in terms of funding, in terms of facilities, in terms of whatever. Well, guess what? The last, probably 18 months to 2 years, they have upgraded everything across the board, okay? And so I bring it up because you got to give credit where it's due. Big Ten, 100,000 seat stadium. We've all watched the whiteout either in person or from a distance. It's unbelievable. And so I just bring it up because it's a great job in a great conference. And I think if you're Kalani Sitake, like, I think you got to consider it, right? I mean, if Penn State calls, I think you got to go ahead and pick up. And so we'll see what happens from there. I think what's interesting is, does he actually make the plunge? And I think what gets interesting is the timing of it and all of that. One, from the Penn State perspective, I just think it's interesting. They clearly have somebody in mind that we're not aware of, because it is the day after their season ended. They don't have a coach in place, okay? And Bob Chesney, who I actually thought was the guy that was maybe going to get it, he just took the UCLA job right before we went on air here. And so I only bring it up because of the fact that, like, I sit there and say, there's not very many good candidates left, and it's got to be somebody that's probably still coaching, right? And so from the Penn State perspective, it's got to be somebody that's coaching, or a total wild card, maybe Brian Dable, who of course is a former offensive coordinator at Alabama, was the New York Giants head coach. Like, but you're running out of realistic names to be linked to that job. And so I think it makes sense. Now, I do think, and listen, I don't want to offend anybody, I think the cultural fit is a little bit weird. Kalani Sitake, for people who don't know, played at BYU. Virtually his entire coaching career was either at BYU, at Utah, or at Southern Utah. Now, he had a year at Oregon State, a year at, I want to say, Northern Arizona or something like that. But I mean, doesn't strike me as East Coast, Midwest. Now, I do think, like, the way he plays football is Penn State football through and through, okay? So there's that element of it. I don't know that culturally it makes a ton of sense. And I'll say, like, big picture and small picture, I just don't know that this is the time to leave BYU, right? One, the small picture is you are playing to go to the college football playoff this weekend. And by the way, I should mention, BYU fans, while we're here, if you need last-minute tickets to Arlington, Texas, to go to that game, better use SeatGeek. SeatGeek is America's #1 ticketing app, 28 million downloads. What I love about them, they rate every ticket 1 through 10, green dot, red dot. But what I really love about them is they take care of listeners of the Aaron Torres pod. If you use promo code Torres, that's promo code TORRES at checkout, promo code Torres at checkout, you get yourself $20 off your first purchase at SeatGeek.com. So SeatGeek.com, promo code Torres, get you $20 off your first purchase. SeatGeek.com, promo code Torres, $20 off your first purchase. If you're going to Arlington, you better use that ticket. If you haven't bought tickets yet, you better use that promo. Okay. That's where it gets complicated to me. You're getting ready for the biggest game. BYU fan, you tell me, man. I'm not a historian. I know you won a national championship in the 80s. Is this the biggest game since the national championship? It just feels like weird timing to make a move like this. Now, you should take the call. If it was my best friend, I would tell him, take the call. It's Penn State. You should. The counter to that, though, is the small picture is you're playing for a Big 12 title. And I know what just happened with Lane Kiffin. I don't see a world where anyone is leaving BYU if you win the Big 12 and you're going to the college football playoff, where, by the way, I think they actually match up better with people than others think. But I just bring it up because I don't see that happening. The other thing that really struck me as I was thinking about this is that, I sit there and I say, like, BYU athletics in general is in about as good of a place as it's been since I've been covering college sports, right? It goes back to the interview I did with Kevin Young at BYU basketball when he got the job. He said, look, man, everyone's talking about my NIL. You know what really helps? One, I'm from the NBA, but two, it's the Big 12 affiliation. And so you look at BYU, they're in the Big 12. Their NIL is on par with pretty much anybody, maybe not Texas Tech, but pretty close. Ryder Lyons, one of the top quarterbacks in America, is committed. Now, I know he doesn't come next year, but the following year. But I just bring it up because this is what you've been waiting for. You've been waiting 30 years for a moment in college sports like this. You're in the right conference with the right funding, with the right, the rules benefit you. Just feels like a crazy time to go. I almost, ironically, it reminds me a little bit of Lane Kiffin, where one of my biggest gripes with Lane Kiffin is, dude, if you want to coach at a blue blood power, another one's going to open in a year, in 2 years, and you're not going to be coaching in the playoff. Like, those jobs are going to open again. Now, in Lane Kiffin's case, maybe it's not LSU. And in Kalani Sitake's case, maybe it's not Penn State. Doesn't mean that those type of jobs aren't going to open. This just feels like a weird time. We'll see what happens. Obviously, throughout the weeks, Kalani Sitake is going to have press availability. I would imagine, I think if there are legs to it, he's going to handle it well. Now, I guess there's always the possibility that he basically publicly announces that he's not a candidate for any other jobs or whatever. I just bring it up because I think we'll get some sort of clarification in the coming days. I see why Penn State is interested. I see why Kalani Sitake would take the call. I don't know that I see it actually happening. All right. I think that's it for this episode of the Aaron Torres Pod. I'll tell you this. The other interesting piece of news from the day, Bob Chesney, the head coach at James Madison, has officially taken the UCLA job. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. All I'll say is that this guy, he's only 48 years old. He has been at 4 different head coaching stops, and he has won big at all of them. I'll tell you a quick side story. The job he was at before James Madison was Holy Cross. His final year, he walked into Rentschler Field and beat the UConn Huskies. And that's, I guess it was his second to last year. And that's when I knew. I was like, oh, this guy's for real. His last year, by the way, he went to Boston College and lost by a field goal. So I just bring it up. I think it's a great hire. I can't believe UCLA pulled it off. Maybe we talk about this more tomorrow. I got to get out of here. If you're not subscribed, make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, wherever you get your podcast. Rate, review the show. Give us a quick 5 stars. Thank you again to SeatGeek. Thank you again to Collie Puffs. Promo code Torres at SeatGeek gets you $20 off your first purchase. We'll be back Tuesday morning. I have a feeling there's going to be plenty more to discuss on Tuesday morning. We appreciate your support. We appreciate you tuning in to the Aaron Torres Sports Pod.